Good evening, and thank you all for attending the session this evening. This is a sort of an informal question and answer session regarding the proposed amendments to the town's harbor ordinances that govern how we run our harbor. My name is Flip Huffard. I am one of the co-chairs of the Coastal Commission. Sam Bridges over here on my right is the other co-chair, and then to my left is John Keena, who is our harbor master in town. So you may or may not know, but the harbor master and the Coastal Commission have been working for roughly the last 18 months to come up with an update on the harbor ordinances. And those are the part of the town rules and regulations that govern how the harbor is run and then also how the mooring fields are run. At this point, the harbor master and the Coastal Commission have submitted a proposed set of amendments to the Board of Selectmen. They have reviewed that and approved that draft. That is the draft that's over here and that has been widely available in various links on emails and things like that. And the Board of Selectmen have now forwarded it to the RTM for their review and approval. That RTM process, they can speak more to the exact process tomorrow when they have an RTM meeting, but will likely stretch into the fall. So it's not something that's going off on a hair trigger here. This evening's session, as I said earlier, is an informal session, really designed as a Q&A session for the three of us who have been involved in coming up with these proposed changes along with the rest of our colleagues on the Coastal Commission. So that the three of us can answer your questions that you may have, perhaps give you some color on what our thought process was on proposing these changes. It is not specifically a comment session. So the comments, if you have any, will need to be made directly to the RTM. And the start of that process will begin tomorrow evening when there is an RTM hearing on these proposed changes. So tonight is not, you don't have to go on the record if you have concerns or thoughts on this. You can easily show up tomorrow, and I believe there are email options to submit comments to the RTM also if you can't make tomorrow's RTM meeting. Now, before we get into the Q&A session, John Keena will walk you through a brief summary of the thought processes that underlie the proposed changes, and then he'll talk about some of the more material changes so that you can get a better sense of them. We will, after John's presentation is finished, we will then move into a Q&A format. There is a microphone over there. If you have a question, stand up and speak into the microphone so that people on channel 79 can hear what your question is. And if you would also limit yourself to one question at a time, you're welcome to come up multiple times if you have multiple questions, but let other people take a turn too. So with that, let me hand it over to John, and you can begin your presentation.
Thank you. Just to introduce myself, my name is John Keena, as Flip mentioned. I'm the Connecticut Harbor Master for the state of Connecticut. My area of management is Darien Harbor. To tell you a little bit about myself, I've been a resident of Darien since 1971. I've been a boater for my entire life since I was a child. I've witnessed many changes in Darien's waters over the years. So we'll start with an agenda here. Town ordinance history, current key challenges, key recommended changes and clarifications, research and discovery, advantages of the proposed changes, rollout and enforcement of changes, and addressing public concerns. That would be part of the Q&A session. So to start with, just wanted to give you a little bit of a history of the original ordinances. Current ordinances were adopted sometime in the 1960s and codified around 1972, and amendments were made in the 2000s. In 1984, the state of Connecticut adopted the Harbor Management Act, and Connecticut towns were invited to become part of that on a voluntary basis. Darien opted not to after consideration and dissolved the Harbor Management Commission and stayed with its ordinances. I'll give you a little more detail on that as to why the town of Darien stayed with its ordinances as opposed to adopting a harbor management plan. Although the 2000 amendments were good, they didn't address some issues in their entirety and didn't address the changing times. Examples of this are the waitlist and the emergence of day moorings that came in the 1990s, and I'll get a little more into day moorings. So after numerous conversations over the past 3 years with mooring holders and people on the wait list, many didn't understand how the mooring process worked. Ordinances didn't really go into detail. I relied on my experiences, the practices of the previous harbor masters, the ordinances, and the harbor master's page on the town of Darien's website. After having conversations with numerous people on these wait lists and also in the harbor, I had some concerns, and I brought some of these concerns to the Connecticut Attorney General's office. And I asked them to do a review of Darien's ordinances. Their findings were they were not specific enough to manage our harbors to the level that was needed, and they also could be interpreted differently because they were somewhat ambiguous based on the changes and the practices that previous harbor masters had adopted. So here's some of the key challenges. Darien Harbor is crowded. I'm sure if any of you have gone down to Pear Tree Point Beach, you'll see that the harbor has grown in volume. When I arrived here in 1971, my father got a mooring in Darien Harbor with no wait list at all. He was just dropped right into the harbor. There were no issues. To add to this, the members of the Norotan Yacht Club, they've had a launch service. The Darien Boat Club added a launch service sometime in the 2010s. And what also added to this was the advent of COVID. I'm sure that many of you saw the increase in boating during the COVID years. Many people opted to purchase vessels instead of travel. So we saw a lot of new boaters in Darien, which really contributed to the length of the wait list. Added to that, the ambiguity of the current ordinances not keeping in time with this day and age of Darien's waters led to confusion and frustration with some people as they didn't understand how things worked. So here are some key recommended changes and clarifications. So currently the wait list sits at 175 today. It was 230, 240 when I started in 2022. This is a result that I had with discussions with people on how the list worked, what lists they really needed or wanted to be on, and those that repeatedly declined. In the mooring system that I inherited, there was record of many people who, even though they were offered moorings numerous times, they declined. And there's nothing to the fact that speaks to can you decline numerous times. And we'll get to that in a minute. The other way I got this number down was to talk to people, help them understand how lengthy the wait list was when they were repeat declines. and try to appeal to their sense of fairness in the harbor. And many were like, you know, I really don't see this coming in my future, and they opted to come off the list. The other way that I also got the number a little bit lower was the enforcement of deadlines. It has always been a requirement that you renew by February 28th, and many people did not, and sometimes it dragged on and on. Hand in hand with that, I also increased by far the number of reminders. As a practice now for waitlist renewers, I give them initial notification plus 5 reminders during January and February. That also contributed to the drop in the waitlist to 175 today. So proposed, in these ordinances, waitlist, if you're on the waitlist, you're allowed 1 refusal. Also proposed, because this was of great concern, and I've come across this 3 times as Harbor Master, is the transfer of a permit to a spouse or Connecticut recognized partner in case of death of the permit holder. There's nothing in our ordinances that address that. Many people had concerns when that took place. I, as a practice, even though not in the ordinances, I did extend that to the folks in the harbor who had lost their spouse or significant other and transferred the permit to them. Also, hearing from conversations with people in the harbor is also a mooring succession. Many people felt that once they were granted a permit, it was something that they could hand on in perpetuity to family members. Many were not happy to find that out. So, also proposed is a mooring succession transfer process for non-spouse, family, and friends. And basically the way the process works is that if you have a permit and you have a child that wishes to be in the harbor, there are a couple options. That person, your child or friend, could get on the wait list and on their own get a mooring. But I know from years of boating, people become very attached to their spot in the harbor and like to keep it in the family and like to pass it on to their family members. Now, it wouldn't be fair just to hand it off to a child or your son or daughter, because that would mean that they have circumvented the wait list, and there's a number of people who have been on that wait list for a number of years. With this plan, what it allows you to do is have an open dialogue with the harbor master, and your child or friend would get on the wait list, and when they've risen to the top of the list, the harbor master could help facilitate the transfer of that spot in the mooring. That spot in the harbor. Now, this isn't to be confused with giving someone your permit. It is the ability to move into that spot that you may feel dear to you. I think it's something that people will like. Another distinction is between berthing and day mooring harbors. So, what defines a berthing or a day harbor? Scott and Ziegler's Cove were not always day harbors. They were berthing harbors in the 70s and 80s, and even up in some point maybe making that transfer into the 90s. There's a picture to the far over there. That is, you may want to come up and look at it later. But it is a picture of Ziegler's Cove in 1988. And back then, Ziegler's Cove was actually managed by a de facto harbor master who was an employee of the Ziegler family. And the only way to get access to the moorings in there was if you were given permission to drive down onto the property. There is a dinghy dock, and you can clearly see it in that picture. And if you were granted that privilege, you'd be able to access a mooring in Ziegler's Cove. That harbor was policed, and it was kept pretty exclusive. As time went on, that went away. If you look also at the picture, you'll see Scott's Cove to the north, or to the top of that picture, and you'll see that there's no visible moorings in Scott's Cove, with the exception of one for a very, very large houseboat. And for those of you who've been around for a long time, the name of that houseboat was Fat Man. And that was pretty much the only boat that was there. There was also a string of moorings that were to the north of Great Island, and they comprised a string of moorings that were pretty much held and used by residents of Salem Straits. So flash forward today, I will show you some pictures later on, to look at Ziegler's Cove today during a weekday is a much, much different picture than what you'll see over there. So defining Berthing Harbor. So Berthing Harbor is where your vessel is stationed, kept, when it is not being used. A day harbor mooring is where you tie up your mooring on a temporary basis and remain on the vessel. This has been an undocumented practice, and it has been in place in Darien for many, many years now, going back to the 90s. So how did we come about determining what was a berthing harbor versus a day harbor? And there's probably a number of different ways you can express it, but one way that I express it is moorings in berthing harbors have a direct line of sight and access to a mooring from land. Day harbors may or may not have a direct line of sight to a mooring from land, but no direct access from land. The only exception to this would be littoral property owners. Littoral property owners are people who are granted a special exception from the state of Connecticut to have access directly to the water. So in the case of Ziegler's Cove all those years, the littoral property owners were the Zieglers and Steinkrauses. Things have changed since then. And then, of course, there are numerous houses on the water in Scott's Cove that have littoral access. Current ordinances added verbiage about rafting of vessels, but it doesn't specify which harbor, only the quantity of vessels. Rafting can put in an additional strain on the tackle, and when we have one set of tackle standards, there are more tackle. Just as a point, I have more tackle issues and failures in Ziegler's Cove versus Darien Harbor. Darien Harbor has roughly 150, 160 moorings. Ziegler's Cove really only has 25 permitted right now. So there are some challenges there. So, development. I'm jumping ahead here. Research. Okay, research and discovery. So, over the past 2 years or more, we've actually been working on this red line that many of you have seen. All of the meetings that created this red line are available on Channel 79 as well as the Board of Selectmen approval. The approval for this involves both state and local processes for the full approval. It needs to be fully approved by Connecticut DEEP after the RTM. So even after the RTM fully approves it, there is still one step where Connecticut DEEP has to approve. There were many, many individuals and groups that were consulted in the creation of this document. Connecticut DEEP, the Connecticut Attorney General's Office, Connecticut DMV, Town Council, a maritime attorney, a harbor management consultant, and Customs and Border Protection. So what we also discovered is, coming out of what I was speaking earlier about the fact that the town did not adapt a harbor management plan and adopted to keep its own ordinances, that was because Darien has what's known as a special act. It's a piece of legislation that was passed by the state of Connecticut in 1953, and it is Special Act 957. This gives Darien the authority to control its harbors and waters, and that is the basis for the proposed and current ordinances. So in addition to some of the components in Special Act 53-5-97, it allows for the creation of a special harbor constable to manage the moorings in Darien. The Connecticut Harbor Master role will be a contact between Darien and the state of Connecticut on non-mooring issues. Although in my capacity right now, I sort of act as a liaison between Darien and the state of Connecticut, that will be sort of a separate role. And the vision is for me to, although have the same responsibilities, now just have two hats. It is written into the proposed ordinances that these jobs can be one and the same, or they can be separated. So in addition to, adding to this development of solution, I've had many and numerous conversations with mooring permit holders and people on the wait list to educate them and also obtain feedback. So, some advantages to the proposed changes. A new slow no wake zone. Anyone who has been in Ziegler's Cove has seen vessels entering the harbor too quickly. This creates proposed ordinance creates a no-wake zone from Ziegler's Cove across the front of Great Island to Scott's Cove and through the Fish Island Harbor. So this whole area now, where many, many people choose to go to on weekends now, will become a no-wake zone. Separate mooring tackle standards. Now, one of the things that is in the current ordinances is the fact that rafting is allowed. And one of the things that, as well as an example, according to our ordinances, you need to have your boat on a mooring by June 15th. That really, in practice, can't apply to someone who has a day mooring in Ziegler's Cove or Scott's Cove, because that is not where their vessel is stationed. There's no documentation, although it has become a practice for a few decades now, of having these day harbors, and they actually were held to a different standard. This is just a practice that's been adopted by, I've continued to monitor, but it was adopted by previous harbor masters. So having these separate tackle standards is important because in our ordinances you allow rafting up. And one other confusing aspect about the current ordinances, the rafting up does not speak to a specific harbor. I've actually had people call me and ask me if they could put two boats on a mooring in Darien Harbor. I think we all know that that would not end well in case of bad weather. So there's some things that have cropped up that need to be updated. The tackle standards in the rafting harbors, which are Ziegler's and Scott's, I have more problems over there than I do in Darien Harbor, and the problem is our tackle standards treat Ziegler's and Scott's, the rafting harbors, the same as far as tackle in Darien or Noroga Bay. In order to safely have vessels wrapped up, you need different tackle standards, heavier tackle. There's other complications in there which I won't get to, but it's important that these tackle standards be updated so that there are fewer problems in Ziegler's Cove. As I said before, the provisions of Darien Harbor Master appointing a special harbor constable. This creates separate duties, but as I said, That's all I really have to present, and I guess you can.
Yeah, so, thanks, John. So why don't we move on to the Q&A part of the evening? And so if there are any questions among you, we'd be happy to try to address them. If you would, go up to that microphone. I don't know if it's on or off, but the first person can test it.
I thought it would be interesting. It really gives a good
Is that
perspective
just
of
tap
what our
it?
harbors look like during the season.
Yeah. That sounds like it's on.
Good evening. My name is Susan Marks, even though you're not doing it formally. I am on the RTM, and I am... Better? Okay. Good evening. My name is Susan Marks. I'm on the RTM Parks and Rec, and I also am a boater in Darien and have been for 30 years. I have a list of questions, and I understand just take one at a time. First, I want to thank you guys. I know that this has been many, many, many hours of hard work, lots of decisions, so I definitely appreciate all of everything that's gone into it. Part of my goal tonight is to ask some questions so that way RTM members that might not be boaters might understand things. So if you'll just bear with me. So I'll just start with, I've kind of gone along with how they're written. So my first question has to do with 7821, and it's the day moorings. So it says that if you want to stay overnight on a day mooring, you have to notify the harbor master. And I'm a little confused on the day moorings. I get the concept of the berthing and the day, but the day harbor, I feel like we're not protecting those mooring holders as much because, you know, I don't have a mooring at Ziegler's, but if you do have a mooring at Ziegler's, you know, you should be able to stay there however long.
Can you point us to the language where it says you can't
So,
spend
yeah,
overnight?
under day mooring harbors.
In
at
the definition, or?
Yes, in the definition, under
Okay.
7821. So it says, however, the special harbor constable may allow boating to occupy berthing-type moorings in day mooring harbors with written permission. So I'm...
That is not, you want to answer that? Or you want me to?
Well, that's not the intention of it.
Okay.
The intention of it, you can certainly spend the night on your day mooring overnight. You need to remain on the vessel. You can't leave it.
Correct, okay.
So what we're speaking to here is, we're talking about berthing moorings in day harbors, okay? Now, it says with written permission. Now, there's a couple of things there. First off, these do not supersede any state statutes. If you are a littoral property owner, you can have a berthing mooring in a day harbor. That does exist and always will. What the intent here is not to have people who never have line of sight or access to their vessel leaving it unattended.
So that language is not designed to prevent you from sleeping overnight. It is designed to allow the flexibility for there to be littoral moorings in day harbors, which in both Ziegler's and especially Scott's, there are people who have waterfront homes who actually do use their moorings as berthing moorings, even though generally speaking for most people, it would be a day mooring setup.
Okay, so maybe we, as the RTM, maybe we need to just tweak that a little bit because others might understand exactly what you're saying and some might understand what I'm saying. So anyway, okay, I'll wait for others.
Before you sit down, let's see how many other questions there are. Are there other people with questions? Happy to take. Yep.
Susan, I'm going to bring this up a little bit.
Yeah. That's fine.
Oops, dropping everything on the ground. Pick up my phone. Hello, my name is Keel Evans. I've been a mooring owner at Ziegler's Cove for over 17 years, and I applaud John.
Can you just speak?
I'm sorry.
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
Raise the microphone.
Raise the microphone, okay. My name is Keel Evans. I've been a mooring owner at Ziegler's Cove for the past 17 years, and I applaud John for what he's trying to do. I've seen everything out there. There's been no jurisdiction out there whatsoever in 17 years. And I've had moorings in other states, and it's run way differently. In Connecticut, there is zero rules almost that have been applied or policed. And what I see out there is dangerous. At Ziegler's Cove, it's downright dangerous. I know John and I have spoken quite a bit. Over the past 3 or 4 years, I'd be swimming and I would kick a mooring that was broken because they've not been policed. They've not been attended to. John and I have had the discussions possibly about every year pulling them out. If you don't want to do it, get out. And it's dangerous. And people do spend the night out there. And I would not spend the night at anything but my own mooring because I know what's around me. And those people are going to end up on the beach one day. And so it really has to be policed better. And it's going to be an uphill battle because the mooring owners are out there. No one cares. No one takes care of their property. And I know it's difficult. I don't know what I can do. I told John in the past, I will do whatever I can do because I'm out there every single weekend. So I know what's going on out there. So, and again, John, whatever I can do, as I told you, it's just, and there are mooring owners out there that have,
Yeah.
that have all been in the same situation I am, and they're in agreement. Let's get it done. Let's get it back to the way it should be. And it's going to be a tough job, and good luck.
Yep, no, like I said, I have more problems with tackle issues in Ziegler's Cove than I do in Darien Harbor.
Exactly.
There's far too much, I call, set and forget mentality with moorings in Ziegler's Cove. I've taken steps to do enforcement. I know you and I have had discussions, I'm sure you've had discussions with people, and I do hear people getting back to me about compliance and what needs to be done. I've actually sent emails to all the Ziegler's Cove permitted mooring holders that they need to provide me with a contract that shows that it's being maintained. If you look, I have one picture that I will show later of if anyone were to go down to Pear Tree Point in the wintertime, you won't see one mooring ball in the harbor. I will show you a photograph, a large picture like that one, of Ziegler's Cove in the wintertime, and every mooring ball, almost every mooring ball is in place. Right. That greatly decreases the lifespan of a mooring.
Exactly.
And it needs to be managed.
Everyone's
These
from
ordinances will definitely help with that.
correct. Everyone's familiar with Port Jefferson, Conscious Bay. I had a mooring over there. Every single year, it got pulled out. It was $500. You didn't pay, you're not going back in. And you have to be, it's going to be a
That's
tough
how
fight.
it does work in Darien Harbor right now. And these ordinances, these changes will help John enforce that in Ziegler's Cove.
And the Ziegler's Cove, I know 8 or 9 people around me who we're all in agreement. So I'll just say, don't be afraid and just, because in the years past, it was lackadaisical. I'm not saying that against Tom Bell or Robert Price, but there was your, now you have a tough job. And so whatever, it is what it is, but it is dangerous out there and someone should be aware of it. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jim Patrick. I'm a member of the RTM District 5. I chair the Public Health and Safety Committee. We're one of the subcommittees that will be looking at this. And my simple question is, we're looking at it from a safety standpoint. What can I tell our committee, what is different about the updates to these ordinances that apply to the police department? you know, with their patrolling? Is there anything different than what they're existing in?
Well, specifically, as I mentioned, it has to do with the traffic in Ziegler's and the ability to manage the environment that arises on weekends. A lot of people go there, a lot of people have fun. I think it's a great recreational resource for this town, but it does come with some safety issues. Although not socialized or formalized, there is a plan that I've been working on, but it's contingent upon these ordinances being passed. I'm not going to get into the details of that. Even the tackle standards are not even part of the ordinances. According to the town's ordinances, the tackle standards are recommended to the Board of Selectmen and approved by the Board of Selectmen. Now, these standards that, if these ordinances were passed, I won't be doing in a vacuum. I will be doing it with the assistance of the mooring contractors that we have in Harbor. We have 2 or 3 primary contractors in Darien's waters, and we will come up with standards. Like I said, not getting into too much detail, there needs to be changes in Ziegler's Cove as a result of the acquisition of Great Island. It's already a very, very popular destination point, and Great Island is going to make it even a more popular destination. The town also needs to decide about access to Great Island from the water. That hasn't been formalized. I know some people talk about it, some people do not. So, depending on how things go, there will be changes that will make the harbor more safe. I think a more defined channel in Ziegler's would greatly benefit it, not only from an access standpoint, but also because of the fact that we have a response vessel in Ziegler's Cove, the Norotan Fire Department's fireboat. I've seen situations in Ziegler's in the past where the police and or the fireboats have had to leave Ziegler's Cove in haste. And there's no real clear-cut channel out of there. But like I said, these are not part of the ordinances, but as far as health and safety, it is definitely on my mind.
But the 2 things from my perspective that, and John kind of mentioned them, but having that no wake zone out in front of the greater Ziegler's, Scotts Cove, Fish Island area, I think will slow boats down, and I think that addresses a safety concern. And then having the ability to designate different mooring standards, heavier moorings perhaps in Ziegler's, so that when 3 or 4 boats raft up on it and a squall comes through, they don't drag into the rocks. Those are the 2 big kind of safety things in my personal point of view. I don't know if you're...
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, Susan, you have the floor.
Oh my gosh.
You break it, you bought it.
Should I just hold it?
Yeah, just hold it.
Okay, so they were in order, but I'm going to jump order for a little bit because this kind of goes to with exactly what Mac was saying. So can you just explain your rationale between changing from 3 rafting boats to 4? I mean, I just heard that you're expecting it to be a busier place, possibly with Great Island. I just need to be able to explain to someone what the rationale was between increasing it.
I think we were, the rationale for it was that we were trying to line up the practical reality out on the water, which is there are many rafts of 4 boats out there that are not causing any problem, especially if we move in the direction of making the mooring standards heavier duty. They're not constrained by space necessarily, and nobody really breaks up 4-boat rafts. And we didn't want to put the harbor master or marine division in a position where they have a rule that they're just like not enforcing. And so I think look, there's ultimately some element of judgment as to what the exact right number is, not black and white thing, but to all of us, I think 4 seemed like a number that was actually something people did a lot, that was not causing any problems, and that when you started to get to 5 or 6 or 7, that's when you started, that was sort of the tipping point. And so we're just trying to line up the actual regulation with practical experience out on the water.
I have more questions, but.
I have a question. Thank you.
Maybe everyone can just hold the mic.
Hi, my name is Paul Haller. I have a question. I understand the difference between day moorings and berthing moorings. However, in section 7832, subsection D, it says,
Sorry, E as in elephant?
subsection D.
D.
D, like David. Mooring holders must submit a current copy of their Connecticut Department of Motor Vehicle registration. It doesn't differentiate between day mooring holders or berthing mooring. So you could, in theory, be a resident Darien, keep your boat in Rye, just because you like to go to the city, or you like to go across Port Washington or whatever. So your boat would be registered in New York. Does that preclude you from having a berthing mooring, a day mooring in Ziegler's Cove?
No.
It does not.
In fact, I would say not a majority, but I would say close to, well, I would say about 50% of the people who have moorings in Ziegler's Cove, first, aren't residents of Darien. There's also a number that are from out of state. We have New York, we also have New Jersey in there as
Yeah.
well. The caveat to that is, if you keep your boat, so I have people who actually have New Jersey registered boats, but they keep them in Connecticut waters.
Well, that's not supposed to be allowed for 60 days or more, I understand.
What they are supposed to do is they're supposed to obtain a certificate of registration. It's not quite the same as registration. A certificate of registration where they don't have to change their New Jersey or New York numbers, but they have to display a Connecticut 26, 25, whatever the year is, sticker in order to be compliant. Now, I have conversations with people who want to have a mooring in Ziegler's, because I also have some people who have registrations that are inquiring with Rhode Island registration. They would have to register because I found out they actually keep them in 5 Mile River or something like that. But the bottom line is, it's a state rule. You have to, so many days that you have to have it. There are a number of boats in Darien Harbor that are berthing moorings that are registered out of state also, but they have to be certificated in the state of Connecticut as well.
Okay, but if you keep your boat in Rye, and you're only in Darien waters or Connecticut waters for 20 days or 30 days.
You and I would have that conversation. I would have an understanding that you keep it in Rye. You're not keeping it in Darien. You're only coming out
Right.
on the weekend, maybe once or twice a month, whatever
Yeah.
it may be. And then that wouldn't be the case, that you would have to get Connecticut certificated registration.
Okay. Because in that subsection, it doesn't differentiate.
Yeah, I think what you're suggesting is that in that actual language there, you might consider distinguishing between berthing harbors and day harbors.
Yeah, that berthing mooring owners or users, permit holders, would have to be registered in the state of Connecticut because they're going to be on that mooring for more than 60
Right.
days.
I mean,
And a day harbor won't be.
again, tonight is just sort of a Q&A.
Yeah.
But I think we understand your
Okay.
point, so the RTM can take it under consideration. Or you
Okay,
can
great.
make the point tomorrow night, too.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm Richard Hoken, and I've been a littoral property owner in Darien for 52 years. The question I have, though, is you mentioned earlier that this will, once this is approved by the RTM, then it has to go to the state for approval. So could you describe that process and what that may entail?
There's only one section of the ordinances that have to be approved, and that is from the Deep Boating Rules Division. And whenever you have something in your ordinances that speak to the operation of a vessel, they have to be approved by deep. I have already sought and obtained pre-approval for the verbiage that would go into, that's in these proposed ordinances. After they're full, Connecticut will not approve what they've pre-approved fully until the RTM passes the ordinances.
But, and Richard, specifically, it's the no wake zone. That's the.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So in 7826C, as far as a mooring inspection service, you have the word acceptable to the special harbor constable. Do we really need the word acceptable? Or what is the standard of acceptable? I think when we use words like discretion and acceptable, it gets ambiguous, like you said, that you're trying to make things simpler, I think. But when you, so what's the definition of acceptable, I guess?
I have to vet the contractor before he comes to the harbor to understand the type of equipment that he has. You know, in Darien Harbor, we have anchors as heavy as 2,000 pounds. I have had, on a couple of occasions, contractors that are seeking business in the harbor that cannot go to that capacity. So I need to understand the contractor's capacity of being able to service the harbor. As long as I understand and they can show that they have a good working history, you are allowed to choose your own contractor. I do recommend that you use a contractor that is close by, because if you ever get into trouble and your contractor is several miles away, say Greenwich, they may not be able to respond to you in a timely manner. And to have you now go find someplace else to put your boat while that contractor finds time, it's one of the things that I like to let people know when they ask me about bringing different contractors to the harbor. But you can use whoever you want, but you just need to understand what their capabilities are.
If there was something like certified or licensed moorings, but those things don't exist. And I think we didn't want to put some reasonable standard in there that then people can debate whether the harbor master is being reasonable or not. There aren't that many contractors in the greater neighborhood to begin with, so I don't, and all of them in the greater neighborhood work in the harbor already. I don't think this will end up being a practical issue.
I think also it's important for us to remember that certainly we're writing these ordinances for the future. We're not writing them for the people that have the positions right now. So I hope, yeah. Okay, in 7829, so the boater, if they need to appeal the special constable's decision, the boater is appealing to the Board of Selectmen, and it's the Board of Selectmen that have appointed the special constable. So, to me, you're appealing to the board that appointed the person that's in the position. So I think the boater is going to have a very difficult time explaining their appeal to a board that's appointed the person.
I will check on this, but it is my understanding that Special Act 53-597 specifically speaks to that.
But also, we didn't really other than changing the title of the job, we didn't really change this section from as it currently stands.
So one suggestion might be also we don't anywhere have a description, a job description or qualifications of the special constable and/or the harbor master. So I don't know how the Board of Selectmen chooses or not chooses, and that's not really an issue with you guys, but I think the RTM might want to ask, what are the qualifications of this person that's filling the job? So the next question I have is 7832A, and that's talking about if someone has a mooring.
32A, sorry?
Yep, 7832A. If someone has a mooring and they're not going to use it anymore, and they refuse basically to remove it, we're talking that the special constable can basically authorize to have the tackle removed if the next person doesn't want it. So my question is, who would pay for that removal? The town? I don't know how we would go after someone, so I'm just questioning, what's the process for that? Or what should be the process that we may have to go down that path?
It might come to that, but if I had to declare a mooring abandoned, I would have to find a contractor, and I would have to pay them, agree upon a price, and it would come out of the harbor master's budget.
So maybe going forward, when the harbor master does their budget, they may want to put some kind of marker in there for that, because what we were just describing at Ziegler's could also be along those
But for
lines.
abandoned moorings, there are two general scenarios for them. One is that the tackle is decrepit and not worth anything. The other is that actually it's good tackle and it can be sold to the next person. So there's both scenarios. There's the opportunity, not in all cases, but the opportunity to actually raise money with the sale of abandoned tackle.
One I missed before. So 7823 is in the very beginning, and you guys just removed the whole thing. It's probably a good idea that you removed it. It has to do with, let me go back. I'm just curious what the rationale was to remove it.
That has to do with disposal of waste in the harbor.
Yeah.
I believe it was removed because it was a restatement of, I guess at the time the ordinances were created, there was no legislation at the state level about dumping garbage, and there is now, and we felt that just to restate a state statute in
Okay.
the ordinances wasn't appropriate.
Perfect. Let's see. 7832B. Go to it. You have the word in here. Let me just find it. Sorry. Reasonable discretion. So I don't really know what that means. I'm going to try and find the actual sentence that it was in.
Last sentence, number 3.
Yeah. So I guess again, it's just when you say reasonable discretion, how does someone determine what that is?
Well, if you were to feel that the harbor master or the special harbor constable discretion wasn't reasonable, you could go to the Board of Selectmen about it. But there has to be a level of discretion in either of these positions. And discretion is not always punitive, sometimes it's forgiveness. For instance, if we had ordinances that said, you have to have your boat in the water by June 15th, and you didn't make it without discretion, sorry, you're out. You want to have that type of discretion. And if it's egregious, then take it to the Board of Selectmen. But in my current role, I've had to use discretion numerous times, and it's usually to the point of helping people, not creating a punitive situation.
Are you suggesting that we take the word reasonable out so there's no argument about what's reasonable? And if someone doesn't like the special harbor constable's discretion, exercise of discretion, then they can go to the Board of Selectmen?
I'd like to try and figure out how to take the word discretion out. I appreciate what you're saying, John, and your example of if you can't have your boat on your mooring goes to one of my other points about basically saying if your boat's not going to be on its berthing mooring for any length of time, the boater is to notify you. I would rather say if you're not going to have your boat on the mooring by June 15th, you should notify I mean, basically, there probably are three reasons. Your boat is either, you're waiting for a new boat, you're waiting for your boat to be repaired, or you have some kind of health issue that's prohibiting you from putting it on. But once you put it on that mooring, I understand you guys want to move the wait list along, but someone could, take their boat, let's say to Nantucket, let's just say they're going to be gone for 2 or 3 weeks, but then the weather turns, so they're going to be gone for 5 weeks. So, it's their mooring, they've paid for it. I understand you want to move it along, but I don't think it's necessary for them to notify you.
It's not a question of moving along or keeping the wait list going. It's so that I don't come under the impression that the mooring is abandoned. And the reason I ask that this be put in is because as I patrol in the harbor, I find a mooring with the pickup stick. And the pickup stick is covered in moss. So it's been there unused for a long period of time. And then I actually have to, I'll make a call to the Norotan Yacht Club, because I know it's a Norotan Yacht Club member, and I'll say, hey, what's going on with such and such's mooring? And they're like, I don't know, we'll have to find out. And then they do some digging, and then they find out, oh, he's cruising. I just think it creates a more proactive environment, just like letting me know, which is already required in the ordinances, is if you can't be on the mooring by the 15th. Once you're on, let me know if you're going to be off it for an extended period of time. So I don't come under the assumption that you no longer need it, you're not using it. Maybe there is a problem. Maybe you're just cruising. But I think it's just a proactive approach to make sure that there's no misunderstanding in the harbor.
But there is, I just would like to emphasize, having, on behalf of the Coastal Commission, dealt with moorings for the last 10 years, we cannot draft something that captures every scenario that's out there. There needs to be some grease to make this all work in a practical matter. And it's things like that. Whether you want to take the word reasonable or not out, I can understand the argument there, but somebody needs to have some discretion to have a little bit of flexibility. And I think generally our history with harbor masters has been that they're all reasonable people, and it's not like they're looking at this job as a way to retire.
No, and I'm looking at it from the standpoint, I'm trying to protect the special constable or the harbor master as well, because, people can say discretion, maybe I shouldn't use the word protect, but it's certainly not an attack by any means, but you've just explained to me why you did that, and that was the whole point of the whole question.
Now, I just let you know, the reasonable wasn't initially in there, and town council put it in. We originally didn't have it, so this is something that town council put in.
Okay, that's helpful to know. I think that's all of my questions. So I appreciate you answering them all, and now I'll be able to explain once we start to debate this.
Did we raise any other questions with our answers? Go ahead.
Should I just bring them?
Yeah, that's fine.
I don't know if you need to be in the camera or not.
Please. Yeah, hi, my name is Cheryl Russell. I'm on Park and Rec from District 2 of the RTM. Under 7832B, where Susan just was, it states here that only the vessel may use the mooring, and the mooring holder may not grant access to the mooring to any other vessel. Does that mean that my children who have a vessel cannot use my mooring when I'm away? Does that mean that when I'm not using my mooring in Ziegler's Cove for a weekend, I can't tell my friend Joe Smith that we're not going to be there, you go ahead and use my mooring for the weekend? Is that what that means?
The ordinances currently state that you are, as part of your, where's the rights and responsibilities, and this is also a current ordinance, you are not to grant permission for someone else to use your mooring. Now, in the case of Ziegler's Cove, as we get back to the point where berthing harbors are line of sight, Ziegler's Cove, day coves are not line of sight. As a mooring holder in Scott's Cove, I know at any given moment when I'm not there, someone might be using my mooring. But as part of your rights and responsibilities, when you come upon someone in the harbor using your mooring, as part of your terms and conditions of your permit, you are to ask them to leave.
Mm-hmm.
So technically, you're not supposed to give someone the right to use your mooring, even though you know it may be used. But we know what happens in Ziegler's and Scott's. It comes with the territory.
I would say this area is one of, as we think historically about the size of the wait list and the lack of ready access of new boaters to having moorings, this provision, or not the provision of the ordinances, but the flexibility that you're talking about letting a friend use your mooring, is one of the biggest causes of kind of the jam up out in the mooring field. Because obviously, you know, in the scenario that you're describing, it's like, I'm away for the weekend, I want to let my daughter put her boat on the mooring for the weekend. That's not going to kill anybody, and that's probably never going to be enforced against you. But what happens in the real world is it's not for a couple days that people let their friends use their mooring. It's, I sold my boat, and I'm going to let my friends use my mooring. And so that mooring is then permanently taken out of the rotation of the wait list. And that certainly, I would say, in John's first year of being a harbor master, unwinding all of those friend deals was one of the biggest areas of work that he had to do. And so it's hard to, I think our strategy has been to have the ordinances be crisp on this point, which is you're not allowed to farm out your mooring to somebody else. But as a practical matter, acknowledging that, you know, if it's for a short period of time, no one's even going to notice it. It's what we don't want is people farming out their mooring for the whole season, for half of the season, for, you know, circumventing the wait list by just giving it to their friends.
Thank you.
My name's Bill Van Loan. I'm an RTM member. In section...
Bill, could you just speak into the microphone?
Yes, sorry. In section 78-32, section C, it mentions grandfathering. Could you explain what's going on here?
I'm sorry, just, are you...
Yes.
He's speaking to the number of moorings in the harbor. Okay, so one of the discoveries that I made as harbor master in the very first years, there was a number of people who had multiple moorings. Can you hear me? Okay. Is this on?
No.
Oh, okay. One of the discoveries that I made in the harbor is there were people with multiple moorings. But the discovery was they didn't have multiple boats. So they might have one boat and two empty moorings. I gave them the opportunity to replace it with a boat, and they opted not to. So those permits were relinquished. This ordinance, we're stating that it's only one boat, one harbor. People who, as of January 1st, 2025, are grandfathered if they have more than one mooring in the harbor.
How many are there?
How many people in
Yes,
Darien
that have
Harbor?
more than,
I don't believe there's any more than, I think the number is only 2 people now who actually have 2 moorings in the harbor. It used to be more, but it's reduced now.
in other words, how can one person use 2 things at once?
So-
How can,
There are people who have 2 boats on 2 moorings, like a power boat and a sailboat.
okay. That seems, if you have the wait list, with as many people wanting on, maybe they should pick one or the other.
I think our thought as we drafted this provision is in the world of rough justice, many of these people have had their 2 moorings for decades. And so since it was such a small number of actual people, we basically said no new scenarios where people are having 2 moorings, but for the existing people who have had them for a long time, they can just keep them.
So when these individuals stop using the boats, then in time, this should all disappear.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Dave, do you want to grab the microphone if you would?
Just along the lines of, is the mooring to a particular person or a household? I'm just saying, okay, just say the husband and a wife apply for moorings.
Yeah, I would have to say if individual applied for a permit, then it would have to be a separate permit for each person.
Well, first of all, it sort of depends on how the boat is owned. There are some boats that are owned as a matter of partnerships, and in those scenarios, it's sort of like the partnership that has the mooring permit. But I think it's set up basically to say that individual people own it, but we do then have provisions that allow for the transfer of that mooring to the spouse if one of the people in the marriage dies, as an example. So it doesn't, if they're both alive and happy and owning the boat together, it doesn't really matter whether they own it jointly or separately.
But are you asking can
Well-
the husband have a permit and the wife have a permit?
Yes, and the reason I'm asking is I know someone that's thinking about doing that because they want to get around this rule. Sorry.
No, I
Thought I'd bring it
understand.
up.
I mean, we thought long and hard about this, but there's always a way.
Yeah, there are infinite ways that people try to game these rules, and we kind of collectively, especially the RTM members here, need to understand that people are actively trying to figure out how to, create a partnership with 100 members in the partnership, and each of them can bring some boat in or something like that. So we're trying to not allow those things, because again, the overall goal is to allow more people ready access to Darien's coastal waters and to the mooring field, and not have individual people like hog it all.
Yep.
Okay, any other questions? Well, thank you all for attending, and hopefully this has been helpful.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.